This is the moon. Well, from our perspective, it's actually about this big because it's quite far. Recently, there has been renewed interest in human habitation on the moon, with missions such as the Lunar Gateway and Artemis under development. But the lunar surface, being essentially a desert in a vacuum, is not a hospitable place. Lucky for us, nature has a solution. Lava tubes are formed when the exterior of a lava flow cools faster than the interior, and then, when the lava depletes and evacuates the tube, a hollow cavern remains. In some cases, the ceiling can collapse, leaving a skylight that we can use to access the cavern. These areas are important in the context of lunar exploration, as they provide shelter from the environment, from harmful UV rays, extreme temperature fluctuations, and micrometeorite impacts. Basically, for a future lunar explorer, it's as close to the perfect location as you can get. But Mr. Astronaut Steven Stargazer isn't just going to hop onto a rocket and go live there with no idea of what's in store for him. He shouldn't. After all, what we theorize to be entrances to these tubes may in actuality just be big holes. This means that we have to send robotic explorers to survey the areas before any sort of manned mission can take place. There are already several mission architectures for such an endeavor. Some propose a bouncing robot, some propose a direct landing in the pit, but for this thesis we will focus on the most viable. A team of collaborating robotic exploration units, or REUs for short. These teams are designed to be heterogeneous, meaning that each REU will have a different task, and by collaborating, they can complete the mission objective. As a consequence, each REU will need sensors tailored to its planned tasks and operating environment. This is where I, a third-year Bachelor Thesis student, come in. Working with the Robotic Innovation Center of DFKI, the German Institute for Artificial Intelligence, I conducted research towards the development of these sensor heads, in particular towards the development of a sensor head for the REU designed to enter and autonomously explore the lunar lava tubes. Thus, with no further ado, I present my thesis towards the design and development of a small-scale sensor head for autonomous lunar lava tube exploration. For complete reading pleasure, this thesis also includes a compilation of relevant literature on the topics of lunar lava tubes and autonomous exploration. So after compiling the research, I outlined the general design goals. The sensor head needs to do two main things. First is provide data for autonomous navigation, and the second is provide a meaningful scientific interpretation of the environment. In addition to these two goals, certain environmental and technical requirements must be listed. These include temperature control, as electronics on board have sensitive operating temperatures. Being dust-tight, as foreign contaminants can interfere with electronics and hardware, and structural rigidity. Then there are technical requirements. The sensor should be able to move on at least two axes to increase the field of view, to provide a scientific interpretation of the surroundings, and provide good navigational data. With these requirements, I developed two designs as my thesis progressed. The first was more rigid and simple, whereas the second included a robotic arm mount. The first design integrates a stereo vision module and a narrow bandwidth imager. Don't worry, I'll explain that in a second. This design also uses double LED arrays to illuminate the area in front of the rover when it is in the lava tube. With this selection of sensors, the Mark I design can do several things. First, it can use stereo vision to extract depth data, which helps the rover navigate. The images from the stereo camera can also be used for photogrammetry. This is where multiple images of the same scene are processed to make a 3D map of the environment. This feature is particularly effective on the surface, where there is a lot of ambient light. The second design, the Mark II, is a bit more complex. This design is a consequence of identifying issues as the development of the Mark I was ongoing, and the subsequent attempts to fix these issues. Highlighting the most important changes between the two, we see firstly the introduction of a robotic arm that increases the range of motion of the sensors at the end. Secondly, the sensor itself has changed from a stereo camera setup to a time-of-flight camera. This is a camera that sends out a pulse wavelength of light, and by measuring the returned light and its relative phase shift, can directly capture depth data. This change allows for a higher refresh depth data, and requires less processing power. Finally, much like the first design, the Mark II has a narrow bandwidth camera to collect mineral analysis data. So what am I talking about? Narrow bandwidth, this and that. Basically, up until now, autonomous exploration units, such as the Mars 2020 and ExoMars rovers, use rotating filter wheels to extract spectral information from the surroundings. These won't do for our robotic exploration unit. It's just too big and bulky to be effective. But the operating environment of the lunar lava tube has negligible amounts of ambient light. This allows us to pursue another means of collecting bandwidth data, narrow bandwidth LEDs, which basically just emit light of mostly one wavelength. Therefore, if we place some image sensors Sensitive to these wavelengths, we can rapidly capture reflectance data of the whole scene at a specific wavelength. Once we have this, we can simply compare this data to know the reflectance profiles of minerals we expect to find in the lava tubes. And voila, you have a Fiorito brand rapid and compact mineral composition analyzer. Now, as far as I know, and as far as my research can tell, this is a novel method of non-invasive mineral analysis. But what are the ethical considerations of this research? Well, this is one of the first steps in deciding where to build human outposts on another planetary body. Incorrect readings or a faulty structural analysis of the tubes may lead mission planners to think that the lava tubes are safe when they may actually be just as inhospitable as the surface. And these are places where help is nowhere close. It is crucial that the data we retrieve is accurate and reliable, as they are ultimately the lives of astronauts and explorers at stake. So what did this research achieve? Well, both sensor heads are capable of satisfying the 4 phases of currently planned mission architecture, and both have applications beyond lunar exploration. For example, implementing the narrow bandwidth imager on drones may increase the survey speeds in the mining industry, and autonomous navigation in caves may help in search and rescue applications. However, the research in this thesis is intended to just be high level. Basically, they are just preliminary designs based on the relevant considerations, and therefore unsuitable for direct manufacturing. Furthermore, and finally, the compilation of relevant literature will help people quickly gain the necessary background information to work on similar projects in the future.